I'll start. One of the reasons why this topic interested me, because when I started El Camino Zen, I wanted a name that hadn't been used in Spanish about Zen, and there was a lot of Zen names in Spanish, but all of their websites were not religious websites. They're like tea websites, losing weight websites, getting muscle, stuff like that. But they just had Zen, And so, long story short, I found a few other Latinos and Mexican people that teach Zen. There, because I was looking for that, and so that kind of it kind of pointed towards Southern California. There was three in particular that are teaching Zen or some form of Zen and meditation that reside in California, all of them. And they weren't, I wasn't looking just in California, I was looking, anywhere in the world, and I found them. And there's a lot of Zen centers in Mexico. And so that kind of started me on the path thinking, geez, why are Latinos moving? There's a pattern moving into, it's felt to me, into Zen and Buddhism. And why are they doing that? And so that I kind of started thinking about that question. And then I actually found LA Times article on it that kind of had the same opinion on me with what I was thinking already. And then I found other website pages that some really interesting. I think it was 22. I took a screenshot of it because I think it said, there it is. Latinos are 12% of the American Buddhist community and has been rising numbers, specifically among millennials. But why Latinos and why now? And so that also kind of further questions, and though Venerable Wandri said Zen resides in questions, not necessarily in the answers to these questions, I still find it interesting to at least kind of try to answer this question. I feel like I did not want to tell my parents that I was practicing Zen Buddhism because I thought that they would be judgmental of it, not because of that's really it, and not because of anything. And so then when I did eventually tell them, my mom did not really like it. My dad has always been more open-minded in these topics, and also more of like let him kind of figure things out as opposed to impose things on him. And so it kind of confirmed when I told my parents this previous idea of that they're gonna judge me, and there was something to the extent of, oh, you've turned your back on, and my grandfather had passed away I think a year ago, and not 2021 a year ago, but like at the time a year ago. And so you're turning your back on Catholicism, turning your back on the values instilled by generations, including your grandfather. And so that was hurtful because I loved my grandfather and I would never want to turn my back on him, And so, but parents have a way of meddling in our hearts too easily, a little too easily sometimes. But it did confirm a fear that I had of being judged, and the same with my family, the same kind of story. I didn't want them to judge me or to see me differently, especially, and I still feel somewhat comfortable with the title of priest. When I was gonna marry my friend, which by the way did not know I was a Zen priest, he was just like, "You're a teacher. You seem comfortable in front of people. You've been my friend since high school. I want you to marry me." But it had nothing to do with me being a Zen priest. But he later found out in the process. He's like, "Oh, where did you get your license? What church?" He was maybe expecting, a secular church. And I told him, no, Venerable Mio told me I could just do it through through Five Mountain because I'm already a priest. And my friends were like, "What? Since when are you a priest?" And all of these questions. Um, so it's been generally speaking, now it's been probably like 3 to 5 years that my family knows, and they don't ask too many questions actually about it. I'm the one that had to kind of approach my dad to like, hey, look, this is what I did, and then he's like, he's interested in the philosophy of it. He's really interested in that aspect. But I feel like they all kind of have that respect of like, no, I don't want to betray Catholicism or making it seem like I'm following another religion. Um, but to me, it has been as sort of easy transition into Zen Buddhism because I find that it has a lot of similarities, Asian culture with Latino culture, or at least some similarities. One of them is the collectivist thinking, form of thinking and perspective. The Sangha is the most important thing. And wherever you are in the spectrum of being a Latino, generally speaking, this is generally speaking, but it's also very collectivistic culture. So it's family is the most important thing. Even the most hardcore uh, Mexican has his mom's name tattooed somewhere, and and so family is really the most important thing, and family will not kick you out at 18, and you can be that's not good or not bad, by the way. I'm not making a judgment because that can be bad, very bad too. You can be 28 and your mom's still like, oh, mijo, stay with me, like, don't leave me, and you can be here until you're old and gray, with your mom. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, but I was like, wait a minute, I'm almost gonna be 30. I should not be here anymore. So you could be there, and you have that. It's very collectivist in thinking. The Sangha in Mexican family and culture is the most important thing. So that was an easy transition. They also have the equivalent of saints. I really like Saint Francis, and Zen have a lot of bodhisattvas, the same as like santos, saints, and that was a kind of an easy transition too. And also it was a space for me, Zen, where I could find and explore my spirituality. That was maybe a more constricting space. At least it felt for me. If there's uh, uh, Catholics here or listening to this in YouTube or whatever, it was constricting for me. And my mom tells me, it's like, it's not constricting. You're just not looking for it in the right places. And she may be right, because at the end of the day, it probably had something to do too with just rebelling against the values of the last generation and somewhat, and then just exploring, because, it's the age of exploration at that time. So I feel that Zen gave me that opportunity to explore my values, my beliefs. Although I don't know if Tom or Venerable Myoto said that Buddha did not say, be a lamp unto yourself or something like that, or I don't know if it was a different quote, but that quote that I listened to or saw and heard before I knew anything about Buddhism, kind of like very empowering. Like Buddha was never like, don't, just believe in me or else this will happen. It was more like, hey, check these thoughts out, check this practice out, see what you can take from it and how it can help you in your life. And even the vows, they're equivalent to the commandments for me. And my dad and I were talking about the similarities one day about them. That was probably the most interesting conversation I had with him about this topic. But yeah, so there were a lot, and there's still lots of similarities, at least for me, as I see Buddhism, Zen Buddhism and Catholicism. Um, there are differences, and I've spoken like the constricting, the judgment maybe, and then I remember also having a few questions as a little kid, and my mom just kind of telling me to believe, and I did believe, and I still believe in another force, but I don't see it as the traditional Catholicism way. So So either way, that's another, and my last point, so we can, move along, but my last point is also, and it was a big weight for me on my shoulders. I was, from the starting, I was, I don't know how you would say it in English, but helping the father. In Spanish is like monaguillo. So I would read lectures in front of people at the age of 8, or 8, 9, when I remember starting reading. And then, for 3 years I did that, and I would help give the father the man. I just noticed that
Oh,
I can say a
altar
lot of
boy.
the things in
It's an
English
altar
because I
boy.
learned it all in Spanish. What is it, Tom?
Altar boy.
Yeah, I was an altar boy. I guess I was. That sounds
That's what we call it in
things
English.
I hear in movies. uh, yeah, so I did that for a while, and then I was a leader in the youth thing, and so I've always been very, spiritual, and yeah, spiritually leaning. Uh, but Catholicism put God at the center, and Buddhism doesn't seem, at least to me, put Buddha at the center. At least Zen Buddhism, it's more about what is this? Don't know. What is this moment? And even when there were, as I understand it, some questions asked to the Buddha about death, or I mean, what happens beyond death, and or other paranormal questions. I guess you could say paranormal questions. um, he always pointed towards this moment and what is going on. So that was a big relief for me, uh, because whether there is a God or not, it always just helps, regardless. It always just helps to just be here, whether there is God or not. And being here is healthy, and it helps me to be here. So that reminder, constant reminder, is what helped me a lot, as opposed to Catholicism. Now I tell my mom, anytime you want to go to church, I'll go with you. I even played guitar in church, I remember, too. So I've always been involved in church. But I have nothing against Catholicism. I owe it a lot. Uh, but I have found a new home in Buddhism. So yeah, though that's my little Dharma talk. I don't know if you guys had any questions.
What you just went through, to a large, perhaps not to a large extent, but it's something that I've dealt with for years. Not so much the Christian thing. I kind of walked away from that years and years and years ago. Not that I don't believe in God, nor do I think one should or has to believe in God, but I always found the Christian faith or perspective to be inordinately Machiavellian, which I deem as being kind of crass. And what I personally go through, I'm drawn to a lot of things. I have a profound attachment to Advaita Vedanta, Sikhism, Zen. They all appeal to me. And at times it's hard for me to reconcile all that in my head. And except when I start thinking, well, I believe there's a God. You don't have to believe there's a God. And Buddha would said that it doesn't really matter if there's a God or not, which is fine in the context of that. But I believe that all religions are essentially man-made.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry, for sharing your thoughts, and it helps me to get, perspectives from different people and how they've struggled it. It also humanizes the thing, when Larry tells me that he's been dealing with reconciling things, and it doesn't make one feel as lonely. So thanks for sharing that, Larry.
You're very welcome. For about 50 years.
Well, I still got, 30 more to go, 20 more to go.
You know, when I was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, um, my folks, weren't churchgoers. Um, my well, anyway, so they sent me to church with my friend's family, and I remember as a very young age, like, you know, being a little kid and sitting there and, you know, listening to sermons and thinking, I'm not buying that. You know, as a kid, you know, there were things that I just couldn't reconcile, you know, things that just didn't seem, you know, like they made sense to me about Christianity. And so I never really, I don't know, I never really felt this kind of bond with it that I did with Buddhism. You know, and even still, if I, you know, started getting into my beliefs, a lot of people would probably argue, you know, it's like, well, Marion, your beliefs aren't really all that, you know, they don't fit neatly into Buddhism either. And well, okay, fine, maybe that might be the case, but I think they probably fit closer with Buddhism than, you know, most other religions. And you know, too, I don't like to be limited to just one religion. You know, I eventually I came to, you know, the conclusion that there's truth and bullshit to be found in all religions. And I believe that. I mean, even with Buddhism, you know, there's what the Buddha said, and then there's what Buddhists tacked on later, that if the Buddha had been around at the time, he would have said, now, wait a minute. No. Wait a minute. I didn't say anything about that. You know, and I think that, you know, Christianity has fallen prey to that, you know, quite largely. You know, various popes and rulers and kings have come along and you know, put their, you know, edits on Christianity. And so I found it interesting to do some study and research as to, you know, what might have gotten mistranslated along the way with Christianity. And I find that kind of interesting, or what might have gotten edited out along the way. And, you know, it comes down to, you know, good old Sun and don't know mind, really.
Yeah.
We all have to figure it out kind of for ourselves. And hey, we have a lovely, you know, spiritual smorgasbord out there to, you know, to gather knowledge from. So yeah. We're very fortunate, you know, especially in this country, because we have such a collection of people from other cultures, from all sorts of different cultures. And we're really blessed, you know, that we can freely, you know, study and engage in and participate in all these different cultures and religions. So,
thank you, Marianne, for sharing your perspective on things and religion, on beliefs, values, and then a little bit of your own story. And I was also thinking too, when you were saying, you know, that your parents weren't, you mentioned your parents, and then I thought, yeah, man, when I went to your house, which is absolutely gorgeous, by the way, or your mom's house, and they had a lot of Asian culture, you know, and I thought, honestly, that was all yours. And then you're like, no, this is not mine. These are my parents. So, and I remember asking you, wait, so did they kind of put the, you know, the Zen in you, and
maybe.
And then you said that. You said exactly the same thing. He's like, maybe, yeah. Yes,
you know, there was always this kind of subtle, I I wouldn't say, you know, but they're a collection of Asian things. Some of, you know, like there's one behind me. There's another one. You know, I mean, they had all these Asian art objects in the house because that was, they spent a lot of time drinking in Chinatown. You know, it's like what I remember about my folks was that, you know, there was always social gatherings and, you know, and vodka and, you know, things of that nature.
You really made Larry laugh on with that one.
And so when I say, you know, that, you know, my folks didn't go to church, it's like quite obviously. So, you know, but yeah, they used to hang out in Chinatown. And sometimes I'd be watching TV, watching like David Carradine and Kung Fu, and Dad would be, you know, in the pass through the room, and you know, the old white-eyed, you know, blind monk would be there, and Dad would say, "Oh, there's Key Luke. I knew Key Luke. I used to drink with Key Luke in Chinatown." You know, it's like he'd see these, you know, or the watch peddler in MASH, you know, hey Hawkeye, want to buy a watch, you know, and Dad would say, "There's Richard. I knew Richard," you know. You know, so I kind of grew up with, you know, you know, and I kind of wondered if my folks took me to Chinatown and there were all these kind of mysterious, you know, places and Chinese benevolent society of this or that, you know, that would walk by and you know, Dad would talk about things and I'd be kind of curious. It's like, well, what are these people are very culturally different. What do they believe? You know, what are their beliefs? And
yeah, that was, he instilled that question with the little...
They believe in Buddha. Well, who's Buddha? You know?
And so began a life of curiosity.
Yeah, right?
And then another point, thank you, Marianne, for sharing that lovely story. And another point that I thought of when you were speaking, you know, that even if, kind of like when you tell the students fables that aren't real, like, you know, dragons and unicorns, but they're about kindness and they're about love and they're about unity and harmony and balance and discipline and etc., you know, equanimity. Even if, you know, these dragons and unicorns aren't real, you still get a real teaching. So even if, to me, for example, a very drastic thing, that even if, you know, what was written in the teachings, or Buddha was not real, and all his followers and all the saints, and you know, but even if it all was all made up, you know, by someone or something, it still has taught me a lot, and that is real to me. So it helps me in my daily life. And so what more can I ask out of anything, you know, out of any religion, for it to make one a kinder, more compassionate person? And so yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to comment. I was raised Christian in England. My parents never went to church, but in England, there's no separation of church and state. You start school with prayers, and my parents traveled a lot, and they'd drop me off with any relative or friend who would have me. But I got a very negative, Christianity to me was very negative. I went with my godmother to church, and afterwards we walked out of the door, and the vicar was standing there, and he looked at me and he said, "And why have I never seen you here before?" I mean, if things went wrong, it's because you were bad. It's too much negativeness. By the time I was 8 or 10, I was an atheist. So when I discovered the Four Noble Truths, number one, there was suffering. Wow, it exists, and it's not because I've been bad. I was hooked. No, the church I grew up with was very negative.
Thank you, Monica, for that experience too. I also didn't think of it. The British perspective.
Your Catholic was all hell and damnation and stuff, but you didn't find it a negative experience?
Yeah, more well, my mom wouldn't tell me like too much of it. Like she didn't drill me down on with it. And then the churches where I went to in Mexico, and specifically in the state of Morelia, uh, uh, they weren't the priests were fairly young. I remember it was 40, late in his 40s, you know, or 50s, you know, for a priest, that's I would say early. But you know, I'm not 100% sure, but they were never very like you're going to hell, sort of. That's not how they um talked about the teaching. It was more like help each other out, you know, and they would apply it to like Mexican culture, you know, like I remember him saying, "We are like lobsters, you know. There, you have a bucket, and as soon as one is trying to get out of the bucket, you get pulled down by the other, you know, just like you know." And then he compared the teachings to, so it was a very lively kind of experience for me. So in that way, it was not negative. In that specific way, there were other ways that it was. But yeah.
When I was when I was 14, my mother convinced me that unless I asked Jesus into my heart, I was going to go to hell. And when I was 14 years old, there's a big deal. We're going to have the earthquake in Southern California, and we're all going to die, man. We're all going to die. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to die, and I'm going to go straight to hell. So I go to church, and I'm listening to all this stuff. And at the end, you know, the preacher said, if you want Jesus in your heart, if you brought him into your heart, just come right up, just step right up. And I stepped right up. And that was the most disgusting thing I have ever done in my whole life. I felt like such an asshole because basically I just went up there. I didn't give a damn about any of it. Hell, I'm going to go to hell. I don't want to do that. I don't care about any of this. And it was the cheapest, most disgusting thing I ever did in my whole life. Sorry I brought that up.
Thank you, Larry, for, by the way, if anyone's watching, we don't mean to be offensive, but it's a very raw experience of what a 14-year-old was feeling. And as you can see, it was very vivid because he still remembers it very vividly. You became very lively there, Larry, so I know that you were feeling it at the time, you know?
Yeah.
But, well.
I felt very cheap and crass, and I was living a lie.
Yeah, and sometimes the soul or this our spirit or our gut or our intuition or our feelings kind of point us into those directions. It doesn't have to be spiritually, but it oftentimes is. But even, you know, when I was, for example, for me specifically, when I was working at a charter school, I felt like that, kind of like it was a very draining, negative experience, and then public school, less so. So your spirit or your intuition kind of, no, you're not supposed to teach at this, even though you're earning much more, or you would be earning much more. It's more like a, I don't know, could be ethical, could be moral, could be something. It's 7:21, so we can either keep talking about this if anyone has any last remarks, or we can also meditate for a few minutes.
Can I make some comments, please?
I would love for you to make some comments, Val. Yes.
When I was a child or a young person, I loved praying for my family, and I really loved the romanticism with Catholicism, the ceremony, the sitting up and shaking the neighbor's hand, and I really loved that when I was a young person. And then when I became a teen, I kind of saw, have you ever seen the movie They Live? It's an old John Carpenter movie.
Larry has. I have not.
Guys, this man puts these glasses on, and he can see these signs.
I have seen it, yes.
Yeah, and he sees like aliens in the mask, wearing the mask. So I kind of that kind of like, those masks were relieved from me when I found punk rock music. You know, I was like,
wow.
This is a bunch of crap. They're saying these things on Sunday, but then on Monday, they're like backstabbing each other. How can I get behind something like that? And this was within my family dynamic. So I felt kind of sad, let down, but then I decided to just move on, look at other things, you know? And so long story short, I developed this kind of sense of, you know, there is no God for me. I don't need that. I don't want that noise, you know? And I think I just need to work on being a better person. I don't need the threat of heaven or hell to make me a better person, to force me to do right or wrong. And my family knows. They know I don't believe in God. I clearly tell them that. They all believe in God. Some of them go to church and they're okay with that. So no one has guilted me or told me you're letting us down. And if they did, awesome. We wouldn't really have a relationship. I would have a major problem with that because I'm open to their experience, right? I'm not trying to take away or change them or convert them in any way. But I will tell them that I find Western religions repulsive and revolting. If you look back through history, the patriarchy of it, how it controls people, there's something wrong with it. And I know it helps people. I know it does. I know the charity of it, that's great. But the bigger picture of it is toxic. And it's concerning.
Thank you for that punk, rock, revolutionary, radical.
Thank you, punk rock, for helping me.
Perspective of that.
What I'm finding interesting here is that everybody that's spoken, you know, here about, you know, Christianity and what put them off about it, you know, it always comes down to heaven and hell. And you know, the thing that the guy said, you know, in church when I was 6 or 7 specifically that put me off was it went something like this. If you are good, you shall go to heaven. If you are bad, you shall go to hell. If you are lukewarm, I spit you out of my mouth. And I remember thinking, well, I'm not good or bad, but I don't deserve to be spat out. You know, I'm not buying that. You know, I just I didn't buy that. Okay. And then as I got a little older, this thought was the thing that just I couldn't resolve in my mind. And that was, okay, I could see heaven and hell working out. You know, we all, you know, the good people go to heaven, the bad people go to hell. Except for this, we're not all given an equal starting point. We're not all born into an equal circumstance. So I may be born into a nice family in a middle-class neighborhood with, you know, surrounded by good people who go to church, and somebody else is born in a crime-infested neighborhood where the only way you survive is selling drugs or whatever, right? So now how, you know, so is heaven and hell on a revolving scale? You know, this person gets a handicap for, you know, growing up in the bad neighborhood. And why are some people born with handicaps? And why I couldn't resolve why we don't start out, you know, all of us with a fair shake.
That makes sense.
That was the thing that I couldn't, I had this belief that this can't be random. Either believe this is all random or you believe everything has to be fair. I tended to lean towards, I think this is all too fantastic to be random. I think things have to be fair. So what would make things fair? You know, and I think that, so that drove in me to become interested in reincarnation and rebirth as topics, you know, and how would that affect, you know, things. So anyhow, so,
Thank you,
you know,
Marianne.
so it was kind of more of a thought of, oh, well, you know, maybe heaven and hell are here on earth and not some other place.
Right.
Anyhow.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, heaven and hell, two opposing, and then Sun said, don't make opposites. So kind of both heaven is hell and hell is heaven at the same time. All right, well, we're almost out of time, but we do have 2 minutes. Tom, do you want to say anything? Close us off with your wise words. Or does Mason want to teach us anything? Does Mason want to say anything?
No, he split. I would only add that Thich Nhat Hanh wrote several books and added several times in his teachings. He frequently called Jesus the Bodhisattva of the West. And I think there's a reason to that, and that is when we as Buddhists are trying to teach other people, we have to teach them on a basis that they understand. And we can't turn them off by attacking their revered saints. You know, I mean, kind of like the way your mom reacted, I guess, you know, you can't turn your back on us type of deal, you know, your heritage and the saints that have looked over our family for generations and whatever. So I think Thich Nhat Hanh was very skillful in the way that he addressed these things to people, to teach them. And you brought it up very early on, you know, the Buddha did teach. It doesn't really matter what happens to me after I have my parinibbana, because what my message is, the Four Noble Truths, period. Master those, you master yourself. So I think, you know, if our goal as Bodhisattva want to be, so to speak, is to relieve the suffering of other people, then we can see that that was also the mission that Jesus had, that Muhammad, Noah, Abraham, whatever, their intent was to relieve the suffering of their people too, I suppose. So anyway, I just try to focus on that. I know I'm probably more Buddhistly religious than most of you, but you know, I just, the Buddha didn't mince words. He said, you know, there are false teachings, and here are some of them. If you believe in eternalism, that's false teaching. This, yeah, you know, if you believe in partial eternalism, that's a false teaching. So he didn't mince words, but he always just told people, focus inward, you can sort it out, you know. So that's what I try to do. Anyway, that's all I had.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. See, I knew we needed that perspective. I'm so happy and honored by all the perspectives we have from a young 14-year-old, you know, British young girl, Tom's religious, Buddhist religious, you know, views, the punk rock, and Marianne's also influence from her parents and her culture too, and so that was really cool. I'm glad that you guys chose that topic. The dog one was not ready. No.
Oscar, can I just add, maybe, don't you think that Buddhism can complements your Catholicism?
Yes, I would say Catholicism complements Buddhism, and Buddhism complements Catholicism.
Because you haven't left the practice or your Catholicism behind, have you?
I don't know. I find myself sometimes when I'm gonna go do something, I'm like, En nombre del Padre, Hijo, del Espíritu Santo, and then just do it, you know. But I don't know if that's a belief or a habit. So other times I find comfort when I've gone, I think a year or two ago, I went to Mexico and I went into a church and I felt, "Whew, this is nice," except for the pictures, the depictions of the pictures. For me personally, they were intense. And so I was like, but other than that, the feeling of it when I went in there was such peace that I don't know if I feel that in the, like when I went to Roshi's, the Desert Zen Center, I didn't feel the same, you know. I feel that after 30 minutes of meditation, but like with the church, I felt it like almost right away. And it's a very, very like, yeah, no, there's really good things there, and then there's things that I remember that I didn't like. So it was a mix, but you know, it's kind of like an old relationship. You remember the really good things, and then you bow to her and you say, "Thank you for your teaching." You know, great teacher, whatever it was, jealousy, anger. Same with Catholicism. Thank you for your teaching. Same with a doggy. I tell the doggy, "Thank you for your teaching," after I pick up her poopy. So you know, so it's all the same. So that was my long answer. And to end this, because it's really late, I agree with Tom. I'm reading Michelle Alexander, the new Jim Crow book, and whatever you think about that, this is what I like, this quote. She said, when you see a Mexican person and the mom and the kid being torn away at the immigration border, and your heart breaks, the same as when you see a black kid or a black teenager being hit or by the police or hurt by anybody else, and your heart breaks, the same as when you see a white kid being separated from her mom in court in Mississippi, and your heart breaks, then we have politics that can heal. You know, and you know, when we do the same thing with religion, Buddhism, Catholicism, Hinduism, Islam, and we cherish our differences and encounter similarities, then we have something that Buddha and Jesus and my dad and my grandpa would be proud of. So, and everyone else, like, which is just, you know, being nice and kind. So I close it with that. Does anyone have any questions? Well, hopefully we've answered some questions to the listeners. Okay, guys. Well, it was nice seeing you. We should probably recite the 4 great vows, Marianne. Because if not, Tom will tell Venerable Mioto. I'm just joking. Tom was like, what? No, it's weird. All right. The 4 great vows. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way is inconceivable. I vow to realize it. Thank you guys for your teachings today. I appreciate them.
Thank you, Oscar. That was a great topic.
Oscar was awesome.
Thanks for leading cats.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I'll see you all next week, hopefully.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.